Have you been studying like different companies and different people within those organizations using Stoic principles?
Yeah, well, certainly through my own experience and through the people that I work with through Learn Leadership.
Mm.
I, they often don't know that I'm using the principles
Hmm.
because, I think it's something that people have to come to on their own. So I certainly don't preach about Stoic philosophy unless, of course, it's my research topic, which or having a conversation with yourself and people who are across the principles. But the great thing about the principles of Stoic philosophy, and I'm sure we'll cover off on those as well, is that they can be applied without people actually realizing that that's what's happening. So, I have people that I work with who perhaps are looking at a career change, or there's some significant changes happening in their organization, which is, incredibly relevant at the moment. And the principles of Stoic philosophy allow them to liberate themselves from a lot of the feelings of victimization and discouragement and a lot of the negative feelings that we can become overwhelmed with in some of these very, very challenging and extraordinary circumstances. So Stoic philosophy gives us a chance to work through those challenges in a much more proactive way without pushing to the side some of the challenges that we're actually facing. So it's dealing with them head on, but in a much more empowering way.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And I really want to discuss the aspect of Stoicism and leadership with you, because there's a big movement within the Stoicism kind of community that says that Stoicism is, one of the more effective approaches for a leader to become an even better leader. I mean, we see that even in the ultimate ideal that we all have in our minds of Marcus Aurelius, right? The philosopher king. Somebody who is a philosopher and a human first, and then whatever comes after that. What do you think is the importance for people to put philosophy and personal development before their career, so that, like, what's the priority there? Because I see it as you should put your philosophy and your personal development before your career, because everything stems from your ability to be a more effective human being, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think is the process for somebody who's looking to improve their leadership skills, improve their career through philosophy like Stoicism?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I would say that there tends to be a misconception around Stoic philosophy. So when we hear the term or the phrase, they're very Stoic, it invokes a perception that somebody lacks emotion, or is uncaring, or closed off or cold. And so that misinterpretation from a leadership perspective can be quite damaging, particularly in our organizations today, where emotional intelligence and interaction and collegiality are much more prevalent and expected within our organizations and from people enacting leadership. So the misconception is that it's cold and closed off and it's a matter of suppressing our emotions. It's actually the opposite of that. And so I think it's important for people to understand, particularly when they're looking at it from a workplace perspective, it's not about closing off our emotions or suppressing our emotions. What it is, and it speaks to one of the principles of Stoic philosophy, which is logic, that it's not about suppressing our emotions, but it's actually recognizing that in any given situation, our senses are picking up data all the time and feeding it through to us. So our impressions of the situation, or any given situation or interaction with people, are continuously feeding us data. And we've got these incredibly powerful minds that take that data and form interpretations, judgments, opinions. And often what happens is people stop at that point. So they trust their judgments, they trust their opinions, and they head off and make decisions or interact with people based on those opinions and judgments. The Stoics, and this is where the social aspect comes into place, the Stoics actually ask us to push ourselves beyond our judgments and opinions. So it's asking us to scrutinize our reasoning. And the reason for that is that our opinions and our judgments are based on our past experiences, obviously, which is a positive thing. We need those experiences. But they can prevent us from understanding the fullness of the situation. And they can cause us to misinterpret the situation. So if we were to interpret Stoic philosophy from the misconception that it's very unemotive, then we would actually be blocking the principle of logic, which is to actually accept that we do have an emotional response to situations. And it's not about suppressing that, it's acknowledging that, it's understanding where our opinions and judgments are coming from based on past experiences, and then pushing ourselves mentally beyond that point so that we can gain a better understanding of what's actually happening in the situation. So it could be talking to the person that you're interacting with. It could be talking to your team. It could be reassessing the decisions that you're making, or just exploring, as I'm doing in my PhD right now, is just explore what's actually happening in that situation. And so logic and Stoic philosophy is pushing us beyond our initial judgments and opinions. And then one of the other principles, so the three main principles of Stoic philosophy are logic, ethics, and physics. So we've talked about logic. Ethics is building a greater awareness of how our decisions and our actions affect other people. So in a leadership context, it's incredibly important. And you mentioned Marcus Aurelius. That was, that's the core of meditations, isn't it? That he's considering how his actions and how his behaviors and his decisions actually affect other people. And it's throughout all of his meditations are based on that thought processes. If I do this, or if I say that, or if I act this way, how is that going to affect the people around me? So from a leadership perspective, pushing ourselves to understand the situation more fully, and then considering and gaining a better awareness of how our decisions and actions and behaviors and thoughts affect other people is absolutely critical in today's society, and particularly as we go through these massive changes that we're all seeing. And so the third principle is physics, and this is probably one of the most challenging ones for people.
And how do you bring physics into the workplace? What's the connection?
Well, exactly. People think of physics in quite a different way than how it's interpreted in Stoic philosophy, even though they're both grounded in the same perception. So the Stoics saw physics as an acceptance and an acknowledgement of what is within our control and what is outside of our control. And the reason that this is so difficult in our organizations today is because we've been fed this dialogue that tells us leaders need to be in control, they need to be good negotiators, they need to influence people. They're constantly being asked to drive and take responsibility and enact certain forms of leadership that are maybe perceived as less effective or becoming less effective in our society today. And so it's very difficult for people to step back from that and take a Stoic perspective of it, whereby the Stoics saw, and in my view quite rightly, that the only thing we are actually in control of is our own actions, behaviors, beliefs, thoughts. We're actually not in control of who we influence or how our decisions play out. In the only interaction we have with that is how we respond to those situations. So that's very difficult for people to get their heads around because they're expected to be in positions of power. But the people who recognize that are much more able to interact with people in a way that the decisions that are made are actually effective decisions and are actually for the common good or the best of the organization or the team or whatever the decision happens to be focused on. And so everything outside of ourselves is completely outside of our control. And the sooner we accept that and focus on our own actions and beliefs and how we're contributing to the situation, the better able we are to enact leadership within organizations.